The iPhone 6s and 6s Plus were both announced on the 9th of September, and they were released just over 2 weeks later. So in this video, we'll be covering whether or not this iPhone is still worth it 9 years later in 2024. So let's first begin with a full design showcase of the iPhone 6s. And first off, at the front, of course we still have the home button. This was in 2015. But if you look at the bottom, you'll see that we still have the headphone jack, which is pretty awesome. Apple removed this on the iPhone 7. And on the back, we have a tiny camera, as well as a flashlight. And the aluminum of the iPhone 6s is actually really durable, and that's because of the iPhone 6 bending scandal, where many people were easily able to bend their iPhones, sometimes on accident. And the last thing I'll cover for the design of the iPhone 6s were the colors. So this device came in gold, space gray, as well as silver and rose gold. The space gray model is the only one to be black on the front, and the other color options are white. Now let's talk about the chipset on the iPhone 6s. So this device has the Apple A9 chip, and just for comparison, the latest iPhone 15 Pro has the A17. And if we look at the RAM of this device has 2 GB of RAM. And just for comparison, the previous iPhone 6 had 1 GB of RAM, and the iPhone 15 Pro has 8 GB. Now let's move on to the battery of the iPhone 6s. So this device has 1,715 milliamp hours, and the 6s Plus of course has a lot more because of its size, so it's at 2,750. And Apple rates the battery health the same as the iPhone 6, even though it has less milliamp hours. But just for comparison, the iPhone 15 Pro has 3,274 milliamp hours, and the 15 Pro Max has 4,441 milliamp hours. Now let's go over the displays of the iPhone 6s and 6s Plus. So the iPhone 6s has a 4.7-inch display from one corner to the other, while the 6s Plus has a 5.5-inch display from one corner to the other. Now the screen resolutions of both of these phones are pretty good. The one on the 6s is alright, while the one on the 6s Plus is actually really good. So for the 6s, it has a screen resolution of 750 by 1334 pixels, and the pixels per inch are 336, while for the 6s Plus, it is 1080 by 1920, and the pixels per inch is 401. And another feature of the iPhone 6s is the fact that it has 3D touch. This was removed on the iPhone XS. Now let's talk about the camera on the iPhone 6s. So one thing that this camera is missing is the option for portrait mode. This was added later on the iPhone 7 Plus. And the iPhone 6s and 6s Plus only have one camera on the back, which takes photos at 12 megapixels, and it can record at 4K at 30 frames per second. And the front camera only takes 5 megapixel photos. Now let's talk about the storage models of the iPhone 6s. So this device has 4 different storage models. The one I have here is 16 gigabytes, but there is also 32, 64, and 128 gigabytes. Now of course, 16 gigabytes is going to be way too low for 2024, so I would go for a different storage model. Now that's it for the storage models of the iPhone 6s. Let's get into the software support. So this device originally came with iOS 9, but it only goes up to iOS 15 now. It will still get security updates for a little while, but it is not going to last you that long. This means that you will be missing a lot of the features that come on later iOS versions. For example, you can't really customize the lock screen because this feature came with iOS 17. So let's finish this all off by talking about how much you'll be paying for this device and whether it's still worth it in 2024. So the cost isn't that expensive. You could get it renewed for about 65 bucks, but I would recommend using eBay instead because you could get it a lot cheaper here for about 40 bucks. And some alternatives that I would recommend would be the first generation iPhone SE, which you could get for about 30 bucks, or the iPhone SE 2, which you can get for 120. Or if you're willing to spend a lot more, I could recommend getting the iPhone SE 2, which is about 120 bucks. So should you get the iPhone 6s in 2024? Well, ultimately it depends on what you're looking for in a phone. If you care about the quality of your camera, or you want it to play video games without lag, then I strongly do not recommend getting the iPhone 6s. But if you just want a phone with very basic performance, then I would recommend getting the iPhone 6s. And if you care about the battery, then I would go for the 6s Plus. So that's really all there is for the iPhone 6s review in 2024. I will have links in the description for the iPhone 6s or other iPhone deals, so be sure to check that out if you're interested in buying one of these. And be sure to come back to the channel to watch more content like this in the future.